Today I want to talk about Jordan Peterson's idea on human evolution as being driven by female sexual selection. I think there's significant problems with that idea. Although there may be some truth to it, there are other explanations that may be more reasonable. He bases his claim that females drive human evolution through their sexual selection on the idea, I suppose it's a fact, that we have twice as many female ancestors as we do male ancestors. And he explains this by saying that women are more selective or choosy than men, and they will choose the top half of the male dominance hierarchy, the better males, and mate with them, whereas the bottom half, 50% of the men, are simply left out of the mating pool and don't get to reproduce. Well, there's a fundamental problem with that. It just doesn't ring true. In real life, we just don't see that. At least I haven't seen it over my 64 years. What I see is, both men and women competing within each group to get the best mate they can in the other group. So men compete with men to get the best or prettiest women, and women compete with other women to get the most successful men in one way or another. And then after that initial sorting out, the bottom 50% of both men and women ultimately pair off, so that no one's really left out. This is certainly the case in a monogamous society. And monogamy has been a great invention for a number of reasons. In polygamous societies, you really do end up with some men that are out in the cold. And that tends to create a pool of angry young men, which is much more likely to lead to war and conquest. So monogamy has had a beneficial effect overall. In that case, in polygamous societies, some of what Peterson is saying may be true, although there could be other explanations there. But I think in our monogamous societies, you get this sorting that goes on, but it doesn't go beyond that. In other words, both men and women get to reproduce. I think there's a much clearer explanation for why there is the 2-to-1 ratio of female to male ancestors, and that's war and exploration. Men are the ones who take off on long sea voyages, such as ancient Greek times, to try to discover new worlds, and don't always come back. Men are the ones who historically have gone to war and wiped each other out. And war and conquest by other tribes has been very common throughout history. And until very recently, it was very common in Europe, with spring being the time of war, and one country going to war against another. And again, in these cases, it's mostly the men who are killed or wiped out. Now, you can imagine the case of one tribe wiping out another, or killing all the men in the other tribe, and then they go in and kill off the teenage boys who might become dangerous soon, and take the remaining women on as their second or third wife. So then you have one man and several women together in a relationship after that conquest. But in the past, back in those days when these kind of conquests were going on a lot, women also died in childbirth a lot. So that would affect the ratio. Otherwise, it might be not 2-to-1 female to male ancestors, but 3-to-1 or 4-to-1. But because women died in childbirth, I think that's one reason it was only 2-to-1. So that explanation of war and conquest seems to me to be something that makes more sense over the long haul. Otherwise, you have a situation, the way Peterson described it, where half the men have no partner in their life. Half the men don't get to reproduce. And again, I just don't see that. What I do see is sometimes women and men making irrational choices. Women marrying some guy that can't help support them, that sits at home and plays video games all the time, and demands that she do all the work. And meanwhile, she's out earning a living. And he may not even be that good as far as taking care of the children. That makes no sense at all, why a woman would marry someone like that. But it's not that uncommon. And I think that's probably more so than men marrying women who don't really fit. Because in general, the woman who they marry end up working, or if the man can afford it, the woman stays at home with the kids. And in either case, the woman ends up doing more of the housework, etc. So it's an unfair bargain, no doubt about it. Anyway, I think that explains the idea of war and exploration explains a lot more about why we've historically had twice as many female ancestors as male. And I don't think that's happening anymore, because ultimately everyone gets paired off. Or there's always some women and men who don't. But that's not, I think, a general difference between men and women. And that's what I have to say for today. Thanks.